I haven't been a priest here at St. John's for too terribly long, and because of that, I didn't know Joe very well. But I did have the opportunity to administer the sacrament of the sick when Joe was near the end of his life. I was able to visit him and his family in their hospital room. And in an interesting way, that's one of the blessings of being a priest. And the priesthood is among what we call the caring professions, those professions that require a lot of emotional engagement. And we get to be with people at perhaps the most intimate times in their lives. And I'm talking about births, baptisms, confirmations, weddings, hospital visits, at the end of their lives and more. And I visited a lot of people in their hospital rooms over the years. One thing that's interesting, and anyone who is in a caring profession would be able to attest to this, is that family dynamics are always complicated, and particularly when there's a loved one in crisis. Now, sometimes as a priest, I have to act as kind of a referee and throw a penalty flag and say, hold on a second. We don't get to say that about mom right now. Now is not the time to talk about that one day when she missed our third grade soccer game. And so every time I enter a hospital room, I never quite know what to expect with the family dynamic. And those of us who are in caring professions, we develop an ability to kind of fine-tune and to pick up on the emotions that are in the room. And so when I entered Joe's room, I didn't know what emotion I would pick up on. And the emotion that I picked up on, it was not anything like frustration, and it wasn't an overwhelming sense of sadness, although there certainly was sadness present. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't fear. The emotion that I picked up on was love. That was the emotion that I picked up on and was present in that room that day, and I presume other days following. Joe loved his family dearly, and his family, in return, loves him. That was the prevailing emotion in the room that day. And today we hear from our friend Thomas, who asks Jesus, well, wait a minute. What if we don't know the way? And this is the same Thomas who we're going to hear from again tomorrow. Thomas, who is sometimes called Doubting Thomas. And we'll hear about why, but to let you in on the story, it's because Thomas doesn't believe that Jesus has been raised until he has the opportunity to experience the resurrection for himself. And the interesting connection between both of these stories is that Jesus reassures Thomas. Both times he reassures Thomas. In today's story, Jesus tells Thomas, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And later, Jesus allows Thomas to inspect the nail marks on Jesus' hand and the wound on his side from when he was pierced. And Thomas believes. When he has the opportunity to do this, he believes. And I suspect Thomas did not come to believe, but always believed in some way. And in fact, maybe he was even in on it a little bit. Maybe he knew that these were the kinds of questions that needed to be asked. Maybe he knew that we were the ones who needed to hear these questions being asked. These are important questions in our Christian theology. And we're here today to celebrate that Joe has entered into one of those rooms that Jesus talks about. When he says, in my Father's dwelling place, there are many rooms. Joe is there. Joe is in one of those rooms right now. And we're here to celebrate that Joe has entered the Father's heavenly kingdom through Jesus Christ, who is the way and the truth and the life. And we celebrate that Joe is feasting at that heavenly banquet that we've all been assured that we will one day get to enjoy. And while all that may be true, it's also true that we mourn and we feel sad. We mourn because we love Joe and we miss him. And we acknowledge that he's no longer here in the same way that he was before. But I got to tell you something. That love that was present that day, I got to visit with Joe and his family in that hospital room. That love is still present. That love still is. And when we finish today, everyone is invited to attend a reception in Joe's honor. And what I want us to do when we attend that reception is to share those stories of the life of our brother in Christ, Joe Mee. We share about the times that were good and the times that were bad and the times that were in between. We share those stories so that that love that existed in that room that day and still exists in this room, we don't want that love to ever die. We want that love to continue forever so that Joe's memory can live on. You see, our theology teaches us that for Joe, life is not ended, but simply changed. And for us, he is no longer here. And one day we will join him, and we will have one of those rooms of our own in that heavenly kingdom, and we will get to spend time once again with our beloved Joe. But for now, we have stories that we can share. Now, there are some cultures that talk about something called our second death. Our first death is when our lives end. But our second death is when someone says our name out loud for the final time. And through sharing of those stories, we can continue that Joe will not have his second death for a very, very, very long time. And to get us off to a good start, I'm going to invite some of Joe's family members now to come forward and to share some of those stories so that we can continue to hear those stories and we can continue to hear about the life of our brother Joe.
Hi. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Samantha. I'm the youngest daughter and the favorite child. Even though my two sisters won't agree with that, but they know it's true. Thank you all for coming here today to celebrate my dad's life. Our family is very grateful that you're here with us today. So my dad was not only the patriarch of our family, he was a diehard Philadelphia Eagles football fan, right? And for those of you that have seen the movie Silver Linings Playbook with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro's character plays like this OCD obsessed with the Eagles. Okay, so my dad wasn't that bad. But he did have rules in his house when you're watching Eagles football with him. And we all had to abide by those rules. My sister Tracy really enjoyed watching football with my dad, and even till up in January at the hospital, she made sure he had his TV set up in the hospital with the football coverage, his iPad at his side, to make sure that he was going to watch this Eagles game. And my sister stayed by his side and watched those games with him. So the rules of the house, one was just no talking. You're not allowed to talk when the Eagles are playing unless you are rooting for the Eagles. You could talk during commercial. That's when you're allowed to talk. And then sometimes he would record the games. And so the other rule was you can't have your phone out checking the scores because he would record it so he could fast forward the commercials. So you're not allowed to check the scores. Talk all you want during commercials. And then when the Eagles would win, my father would always end it with, "Turn out the lights, the party's over." He would sing that song every time the Eagles won. He was a season ticket holder back in the 70s, and back then the games were $7 a game. And which I didn't know this until just recently, that he was a season ticket holder. Nor did I know that my sister Tracy, when she was a kid, went to a game with him. And back then, they didn't have those big TV projection screens in the stadium to get those close plays, right? You had to bring your binoculars. And so my dad would wear his big giant binoculars around his neck, and he would have my sister Tracy carry his binocular case as a purse. And strategically had 3 cans of beer inside. So I would like to share how my dad influenced me in my life. Back in my early to mid-20s, around 1996, I was a single mom, living with my parents, borrowing their vehicles, and I needed a car. And my dad called me at work one day, and he's like, "What time do you get off today?" I was like, "I don't know, 4 or so." He's like, "Okay, meet me at Sand Chevrolet off Grand Avenue." And I'm like, "Okay." So I get there, and I see him in the parking lot, and I get out, and he says, "I hope you like this car over here, because I already did all the paperwork and everything." And I looked over, and I saw this beautiful Chevy Beretta, and it was like a bluish, greenish color, super sporty. I was like, "Yeah." And so he opens up the driver's side door, and he's like, "I hope you can drive a stick shift." And I had thought, I had driven one a few years prior, so I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. So he handed me the keys, and as he always said when we parted ways, he said, "Alrighty, kid, see you later." And so I hopped in the driver's seat and thanked him, of course, And I go to pull out on Grand Avenue, which is a super busy road. And it stalls. And I'm freaking out. And I look in my rearview mirror, and there's my dad in his vehicle with his hazards on, protecting me and shielding me from harm. That's what he always did. A couple of years later, 1998, my dad told me about a job opportunity at Motorola, where he worked, in facility management services. And at the time, I was working in a grocery store. And I thought, that's a really cool job. It's Monday through Friday. It's no more nights. It's in an office, And I was super excited, and I jumped at the chance. And I knew that I had to prove to him that I could do a good job. He put his career and his reputation on the line to get me this opportunity. So when I was hired, I worked for University Mechanical, which was the company that my dad worked for many years. And I just wanted to make him proud. And as I grew in my career over the years, and promotion after promotion, I'm now a director of facilities, and I have a bunch of people reporting to me, and I have this big team and this trust, and I wouldn't have all of this without this responsibility and this respect. I wouldn't have all this if it wasn't for my dad. His parenting, his influence, his guidance, and most importantly, his love. So the last time I had a conversation with my dad, he was in the rehabilitation hospital, and he was doing better. And before I flew back home to Texas, I said, "Dad, I'll be back in a few weeks." And he said, "All right, kid, see you later. And thank you for coming." So Dad, I love you so much and miss you dearly. This is for you. All right, kid, see you later.
Okay, I was okay before she ended it with that. Okay, collect myself. Good morning, and thank you, everyone, for being here. It means so much to my family, and I know my dad is really honored. I'm Janie, AKA the middle daughter, and one of my dad's 3 favorite kids. And what a life my dad lived. He literally did everything he set out to do. The other day I asked my mom, as I'm writing this talk, was there anything lingering out there that Dad wanted to do before he died? Not that I'm aware of, she said. He was happy. He spent his final years engulfed by our loud, rambunctious family, ever watching his beloved Eagles. Can't believe he didn't know he didn't have season tickets. Birthday parties, or the occasional Friday dinner at Bubba's in the corner booth. My dad came from humble beginnings. He knew that if he wanted a big life, it was up to him. And as he's always told us, I wasn't afraid to work hard. At the age of 12, he got his first job working at a dairy plant before school. He did this to both help out his family and also pay for his own tuition. So while my dad's professional achievements in commercial construction are quite lengthy, I'm going to talk about the man I knew. But before I do, I'll share one thing he would say to sum up his career. In his ever so humble words, he would tell us, "I changed the Phoenix skyline." So I want to share 3 main qualities that I admire most in my dad. First off, he was a man of great character. He stood for what he believed in. If Joe said he was going to do something, he did it. He was a natural leader. He freely spoke his mind. He was a man of his word and had little patience for those who weren't. Funny enough, I have also a vehicle purchasing story. I didn't know you were going to use that one. So back in my early 20s, my parents purchased my first car. And they did this for all of their favorite daughters. I wanted a Jeep, and I was thrilled that my dad was on board with that. So we found a Wrangler CJ7 in the Auto Trader and went to go check it out. Fortunately, it passed my dad's very thorough inspection. He worked out the terms and agreed to come back the next day to buy it. The next morning, the phone rings. I answered it. A man asked to speak with Joe. It sounded like the seller of the Jeep. So I ran to my parents' bedroom. Remember back then, the days of home phones? Knocked on the door, told my dad, and he picked up the phone in his room. And then I pressed my ear up against the door. I'm like, what are they talking about? And it started fine. Good morning, how's it going? And then I couldn't really hear anything. I'm listening. And then I hear my dad. "So what you're telling me is you're not a man of your word." Long pause. And then I hear, "So what you're telling me is you're not a man of your word." The seller wanted my dad to match another offer he got. I didn't get the Jeep. It wasn't about the money. And at the time, I was not happy with my dad. But in time, it's part of what shaped who I am. Next, I have to tell you about my dad's charisma. It was magnetic. My dad knew how to work his charm. He was the life of the party. He had a loud, sarcastic wit. And whenever my family would come to someone's house for a party, we'd go to the door, and this is the typical way we would be greeted. Door opens, and you hear, "Joe! Joe's here! Hey, Joe!" And the rest of us were just like his entourage. And then my dad was on, and his energy was just palpable. He dominated any space he was in, and we all loved seeing him in his element. His charisma got him in the door, and then his stories would pull you in. He mastered the art of storytelling. And because of his adventurous life, his stories were wild. Like the story of the tour of the Golden Gate Bridge back in '61. He was on a cross-country road trip with his buddy Les, and they arrived at a motel somewhere north of San Francisco and hit up the local bar. Shocking. They drank and swapped stories with the bartender, and it was something like this. So he asked if we'd been to the Golden Gate Bridge yet. Not yet. You want to tour it? Someone owes me a favor. Yeah, sure. Then he grabs a cocktail napkin and writes down a name and a number and tells us where to go the next day and where to meet this guy. So the next day, me and Les show up at the bridge. We meet this guy. I hand him the napkin. He nods and tells us to follow him. I think we're going to go walk around the bridge. Then he takes us to this tiny elevator, and the three of us had to stand in like this. It was the longest elevator ride of my life, and I'm starting to question, what are we about to do? And then the doors open up, and we are standing at the top of the Golden Gate Bridge South Tower. 360 views of the Pacific and the Bay. And for the record, not only was it a rare occasion back then to do this, it's still virtually impossible to do this tour. You have to know somebody. The last quality, and the most important, is what I loved most about him, is that he was a devoted family man. Husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Everything he did for us. Several years ago, I attended a leadership training, and I was challenged to have a heartfelt conversation with my dad out of the blue. I had to say all the things I've never said to him before, and I had no time to prepare, and I would only have a few minutes to talk. So it was a big challenge for me, because I'm a lot like my dad. We don't always tell people how much they mean to us, we show them. And we never talked with each other like that. My dad liked to keep things lighthearted, funny. We actually bonded through sarcasm. So I called him up and he answered in his usual soft-spoken way, "Hello." He'd be expecting something from me like, "Hey Dad, what are we doing for Mom's birthday?" Or, "Hey, can you pick up the boys today from school?" But not this call. This would be different. I explained to him I was doing some training thing and needed to quickly say something to him. "Okay," he said. "Dad, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you and Mom have done for my sisters and me. I know how hard you work for our family tirelessly over the years and the sacrifices you made for us. I know in the past, growing up, I took so much of it for granted. And now that I'm a parent of 3, I can clearly see how much effort went into raising us. Thank you, Dad, for everything. I love you so much." And then I stopped. You know why we did that? No, why? We did that because it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do. And that's how my dad showed his love for his family over the years, doing right by them. As he got older and started slowing down, his love and commitment to his family got even stronger. And it became very common to hear him say, "I love you." And lastly, I have a special message for all of his grandkids and great-grandkids. You know him as Grandpop or Pop-Pop. You've all brought so much joy to his life. He literally just totally mellowed out as you guys started arriving on the scene. And my sisters and I can attest to that. Please remember how much he dearly loves each and every one of you. I want to remind you of all the things he said to you all over the years, whether directly or indirectly. So it's time for a refresher. Here goes. If someone offers you money, never refuse it. Know how to make money, rely on yourself. Create a great life, Whatever you do, make sure you love it. Never be afraid to speak up for yourself or for others. Always give your best effort. Tell a great story. Be good. Calm down. Don't be afraid to work hard. Hey, no fun. Do right by your family. Be proud of who you are. You come from good stock. Be a person of your word. Go after your dreams. It's what I did. And just remember, for all future presents you get from Grandma, I picked it out myself. Now go out there and make me proud. I love you always, Grandpa. Dad, again, I thank you for everything that you've done for us. Our family will never, ever be the same. Your passing has left a void that can never be filled in the physical world. We know you're still here with us, always watching over us. And trust me, we've received all of your messages. So in the days until we're together again, we will keep your memory alive and carry your spirit with us always. We love you, Dad.